Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to A Moment with Malzahn. Today we're going to be discussing the importance of goal setting, as well as covering the step-by-step process for creating a well-formed, personal defined success plan, or PDSP for short. First and foremost, I would like to start off with a brief explanation of why goal setting is of utmost importance in life. I think it's pretty obvious that if we are to get anywhere of significance in life, that we must have a clear plan of action. Just as if we are attempting to travel to an unknown location, we would just as surely need a map to help us navigate our course of direction. Otherwise, we become lost. During the course of my research and readings on goal setting, I have frequently stumbled across an interesting research study that was conducted by Harvard University and later duplicated by Yale some years later with strikingly similar results. The study starts with the observation of students from the respective MBA programs. The students were initially asked, "Have you set clear written goals for your future and made plans to accomplish them?" The results of that questionnaire were as follows. Only 3% had written goals and plans for the future. 13% had goals but not in writing. And 84% had no specific goals whatsoever. Now 10 years later, Harvard University interviewed those same members of that class again and found the following. The 13% who had goals, but not in writing, were earning an average of twice as much as the 84% of students who had no goals whatsoever. The 3% who had clear, written goals were earning an average of 10 times as much as the other 97% of all graduates combined. The only difference here between the two groups is the clarity of the goals that they had set for themselves and put them in writing. So with that being said, hopefully you will begin to appreciate the complexity of today's tutorial on creating a well-defined personal success plan. Okay, so now let's start off with the very first sheet that we need to create for ourselves. This is the anticipated accomplishment sheet. As you can see, we start off with your name at the top. In this case, you see my name, Shawn Malzahn. Followed by 7 different life domains on the left-hand side. So we got career, recreation, education, financial, family, community, and spiritual, accompanied by the respective goal descriptions in the center here, and then their estimated completion date on the right-hand side. It's very important to split your goals into these 7 different domains, or areas of one's personal life. You see, very often while setting goals for ourselves, we tend to only favor 1, or maybe even 2 of these life domains, and the consequence for that is that we become unbalanced and ultimately not as effective in our efforts. Therefore, it is important, really important, to have a healthy balance of goals that will help serve to keep us well-rounded and focused on fulfilling the needs of all areas of our life. The next thing we'll talk about is the estimated completion date on the right-hand side, which is really important for 2 different reasons. One, it gives us a point of reference that we can use to determine exactly when we can expect to begin any future projects of the same domain that we are presently interested in but not yet ready for. We call these goals anticipated accomplishments, and we'll cover that more in detail here shortly. And 2, the next thing it does for us is it creates a sense of urgency in the mind, basically, since now we have a deadline that we must fulfill. And whenever the mind is consciously aware of the urgency of time, it will naturally create mild anxiety that will serve as the stimulus needed for motivation to continue working diligently in pursuit of our goals. Now, once you have all of your goals clearly defined and categorized within the respective life domain, along with an estimated completion date and description of the goal itself, we can then move on to the next page. Here we have our pending accomplishments. And as previously mentioned, these are the goals that we have a desire to fulfill, but presently are not yet ready for, or are in a position to pursue them at this point in time. Pending accomplishments work the exact same way as anticipated accomplishments, so you will follow the same principalities here as you did on the previous worksheet. Not much else to report on this page. And as you'll notice, I want to point out that along this tutorial, you'll see several different yellow circles with white question marks in the center. These are essentially section details that you can refer to if you need some further explanation on the category or subsection at hand. You can download this PDF tutorial on the Green Rose website and view the section details as needed when filling out your own personal defined success plan. Let's move on to the next page. Moving on to the next worksheet, we see a few different things here. The general purpose at the top is essentially a universal definition of why it is of utmost importance that we accomplish these goals that we have set forth for ourselves. And generally speaking, that purpose is to take us one step closer to actualizing our overall vision, which is outlined here in the next section below. General purpose and our vision. The vision represents how we ultimately would like to see ourselves or our lives pan out in the future. The vision helps us define exactly what type of person we are wanting to become, as well as the type of lifestyle that we are wishing to live. So here you can go ahead and jot down a couple different descriptive words that will help you paint a crystal clear picture of how you would like your life to be after your transformation. In the next section, we have our evidence procedure, as you can see here. This is basically a brief paragraph that explains why you believe you can realistically accomplish the goals that you have set for yourself. This is why it's called the evidence procedure, because we are essentially producing evidence from the past that would support our present belief that we are capable of achieving the goals that we have presently set for ourselves. This section helps to build reassurance and confidence within ourselves and should be reread repeatedly throughout the process of achieving your goals. Next, we have our personal mission statement. This little paragraph right here. As you can see, the overall purpose of a personal mission statement is to cultivate and refine a strong character foundation that will ultimately empower the individual to achieve and maintain their innermost desires. Basically, a personal mission statement is like the mother of all goals. It is that one almighty goal that, when achieved, will bring forth all of your innermost desires. It is essentially the key to unlocking your infinite potential and unlimited happiness in this lifetime and in the next. A personal mission statement or personal mission is essentially a compilation of rules and regulations, philosophies, values, beliefs, guidelines, and principalities that, if we are to follow and abide by, will give us the foundation required to accomplish any and every goal that we set forth for ourselves from here on out. Therefore, it's absolutely of extreme importance that your personal mission in life be seriously contemplated, as this is the determining factor that will shape the rest of your life once you begin living by the definition of whatever your personal mission is. Now, next up, we have our philosophy here at the bottom. It's a simple one string of, well, basically a simple sentence, as you can see. One string of words, nothing too fancy. Essentially, it's a simple statement of how you believe one should live your life. As you can see here, I believe that we should everlastingly endeavor to seek knowledge and understanding of truth while vowing to remain forever curious. As I believe wholeheartedly that this philosophy will help me to harmonize with my personal mission statement, which you can see just above the philosophy, as well as serve to empower me in every and all aspects of my life. Now let's move on to the next page. Moving on to the next page, we see our value hierarchy. This is essentially our character foundation at its core. These are the values or qualities of human thought/behavior that, if embraced and internalized, will be responsible for producing the most beneficial of consequences in one's life. I've displayed here for you 36 key values that are segmented into 3 different columns: column 1, column 2, and column 3. I like to call these 3 columns the pillars of personal power, or triple P for short, because if you are to align yourself with the triple P by making a conscious effort to continuously improve these qualities within yourself, you will begin to notice a shift in your personal performance beyond your wildest dreams. I promise you that. Immeasurable power lies behind these qualities and can be harnessed with a disciplined mind. Now, as we move on beyond the value hierarchy, we're finally approaching the actual meat of our personal defined success plan. Here we see our anticipated accomplishments yet once again. However, this time they're going to be refined and defined to a T. Hence we have the word refined here. So the first thing you'll notice here is some basic information. Some basic information about the goal itself. We've got the goal name, the domain type that it belongs to, as well as estimated start and end dates. Again, don't forget to be specific with your target dates. This is what gives us that much needed sense of urgency that we talked about previously. And next up, we have the executive summary, or basically a positive first-person statement that clearly defines the goal that we are pursuing. Basically, we're just combining the above information and turning it into an affirmational statement of some sort that we can then repeat to ourselves on a daily basis for subconscious conditioning. You see, just having goals written down on paper is one thing. While yes, that's a great thing to have, we still need to consistently revisit those goals and reread them to ourselves. Also, meditating on these goals is probably the best thing that you could ever do for yourself. And we'll talk about that here in more detail in just a few seconds. So next up, as you can see, we have our objectives. The objectives list is also known as our stepping stones, or mile markers that we must pass in order to successfully reach our destination. This is also a great place to revisit every so often for a quick course check, just to keep the next step in the back of our minds at all times. Now next up, we're moving into our sensory description, and this has to do with the meditative side of things. This is also a very important section to consider. Let's move on to the next page so we can see in more detail what we're talking about. Now we're going to move into the sensory description, part of the DSP. This is the part where we break down our perceived reality in sensory terms once we have achieved our goal. Essentially, we're going to pretend that what we want, we already have now in the present tense. And so we will describe it here in great detail, just how our new lives will actually appear before us once we have achieved our goal. And by doing so, we are to pay specific attention to the 3 main modes of sensory perception. So here we have the mode of sight, the mode of hearing, and the mode of feeling or touch. Basically, when we do this, it's going to help us construct a clear mental representation of what we're wanting most in life. And we will then use this sensory description of our end goal as a tool for meditation and subconscious reconditioning. The way we would then do this is to get into a relaxed position somewhere, someplace where we're not likely to be disturbed, and then reread the sensory description repeatedly to ourselves until we can envision this reality with crystal clear precision in our mind's eye. Also, we should force ourselves to generate the intense positive emotional feelings that we would expect to feel if we were actually enjoying this experience in the present tense. That's very important. This will help us assign that powerful emotional feeling to our newly created mental representation of our desired outcome, which will then likely motivate us on an unconscious level to begin acting on the opportunities that will lead to the fruition of our intended goals. I believe that's somewhat how the law of attraction actually works. So the best way to do this would then to be recording yourself, reading the sensory description out loud, and then replay this audio back to yourself while you sit in a relaxed position somewhere, with your eyes closed, and then begin meditating on what you are hearing. This will help you to construct the inner image with much more detail and precision. Moving along, we see the evidence procedure yet once again. Here we're going to follow the same principle as we did when we filled out the evidence procedure for the entire Pdsp earlier, or Personal Defined Success Plan. Only now the difference is that we are going to be focusing only on one specific goal at hand, as opposed to all of the goals in their entirety as we did before. And next up we have our available resources. This is basically our inventory that we have presently access to, which will help us along the way to achieving our goals. These resources are laid out before us so we can actually see what we have to work with, and then we can make the determination of whatever else we may be needing. Now moving on, we have our required personality, as you can see here. We have half of it displayed on this page, and the other half will be on the next page, which we'll get to shortly. This section here is an outline of the specific qualities and characteristics that we need to possess if we are wanting to be successful in following through with our plan of action. These are the values, beliefs, attitudes, hard as well as soft skills required to accomplish our goals. Now let's move on to the next page. Moving along here, we have our potential obstacles, as you can see. These are the barriers that you believe will constitute an inconvenience or a temporary setback when traveling down your path of self-improvement. It is very important here that we be completely and utterly honest with ourselves, and to avoid minimizing any character defects or personal flaws that we may need to deal with. However, potential obstacles may not necessarily be just internal conflicts, as they can also be external factors as well. However, the key here is to think of any and everything that could possibly go wrong to prevent you from achieving your desired outcomes, so we could then develop a strategic plan of action that will remedy the situation at hand if it should ever arise. Which brings me to our next section here, the actual plan of action. The plan of action is simply just that. It's a detailed plan of action that will give us the step-by-step set of instructions required to bring us the results that we are ultimately looking for. Here we should be as specific as possible, as this area will help us to penetrate the veil of uncertainty, bringing us to a whole new level of understanding and perspective. The very last section of our anticipated accomplishment is the perceived environment, as you can see here, a nice little paragraph. Again, here is the place where you would want to describe in great detail just how your new life will be once you have achieved your intended goals. Think of this as the sensory description that we filled out previously, but with much more refinery and focus. This is yet another section of the Pdsp that will be useful for meditation and visualization. That's how we can use it to our advantage. Now, the very last section of the entire Pdsp, or Personal Defined Success Plan, is that of the achieved accomplishments, as you can see here, or basically the victory list for short. Here we are going to list all of the goals that we have already accomplished from the past. This is going to be where we come for motivation and inspiration, as we can then remind ourselves of the times that we have accomplished things in life. So when things get tough and obstacles present themselves while we are pursuing our present goals, we can always resort to the achieved accomplishments section for much needed motivation and reassurance that we are capable of accomplishing the goals that we have set forth for ourselves. It lets us know just exactly why it's all worthwhile in the end. So simply observing all of our previous accomplishments will give us this newfound sense of confidence and courage. And as the list begins to grow with future accomplishments, so will our confidence. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You have now officially completed your very own Personal Defined Success Plan that will take you anywhere you want to go in life. Now all you have to do is make sure you follow your directions to a T. So good luck, and be sure to download the blank Pdsp template from the Green Rose website, as well as this very same example that we have been working from today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns at all in relation to constructing your personal defined success plan, please feel free to contact the Green Rose via email at hello@greenroseorganization.com. And that concludes today's segment on setting goals while planning for the future. And thank you for spending a moment with Malzahn. God bless.